Something in you knows before life changes, not with logic, not with plans, but with sensation, with silence, with a restlessness you can't explain. You wake up feeling like a stranger in your own life. What once felt safe now feels heavy. What once made sense begins to dissolve. People around you may not notice, but deep inside, something has already begun. This is the soul's language. It speaks before words. It disrupts before it explains. It empties you before it fills you. And this emptiness, this aching void, is not failure, it is preparation. A quiet, sacred clearing of space for something new. Jung understood this. He called it an alchemical process, the turning of psychic lead into gold. But first comes the fire. First comes the breakdown. First comes the moment where everything familiar seems to fall apart. In all chaos there is a cosmos, he said. In all disorder, a secret order. But at first glance, there is only confusion, only loss, only the collapse of what you thought you needed to be. The soul does not ask politely for change. It shakes, it interrupts, it whispers, then roars, not to harm you, but to wake you, to show you what has been waiting under the surface, beneath all your efforts to keep everything together. Before transformation, there is always a rupture, not because something is wrong, but because something deeper is ready to emerge. Marie-Louise von Franz called it the collapse of illusion, the death of the identity that was built for survival, not for truth. It is terrifying, it is disorienting, but it is not the end. It is the threshold. So if you are in the space where nothing makes sense, where the life you built no longer fits, know this: you are not lost. You are being rewritten, not by the world outside, but by the self within. And though the chaos may look like destruction, it is actually the soul returning to the center. And from that center, a new life begins. There is a silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels strange, heavy, as if the world has dimmed and you're walking through it without sound, without color, without direction. You try to explain it to others, but there are no clear words, just a sense that something has shifted, not around you, but within you. This silence is not emptiness, it is the collapse of the persona, the version of yourself you shaped to meet the world. It served its purpose, it kept you safe. But now, it no longer holds. The thoughts you once trusted feel distant, the roles you once played feel hollow, and behind it all, the self begins to stir. Jung spoke of this as the moment when the true center of the psyche, the self, begins to rise from behind the veil of consciousness. It doesn't arrive with trumpets or answers, it arrives with quiet, with pause, with disconnection that is not failure, but preparation, because the soul cannot transform on the surface. It needs space. It needs darkness. Like seeds buried in earth, something begins to root in this inner stillness. You don't yet know what it is. You just know what no longer fits. And that knowing is sacred. You are not fading. You are fermenting. You are not broken. You are becoming soft enough to be reshaped. And though this silence may feel like absence, it is the presence of something deeper, waiting to emerge when you are finally ready to let go of who you no longer are. It often begins quietly, with a job that no longer fulfills, a relationship that feels distant, a body that grows tired without reason. And then something breaks, a sudden loss, an illness, an unexpected change. The life you carefully constructed begins to fracture piece by piece. What once felt stable now feels uncertain. What once gave meaning now feels hollow. This is not a mistake. This is the archetype of chaos awakening. It is not chaos for the sake of destruction. It is sacred disorientation, a symbolic unraveling that signals the beginning of a deeper descent, not into darkness as punishment, but into the unconscious as a call. Jung understood that the descent is not optional in the path of transformation. It is the way, the collapse of functional life, The loss of certainty is how the psyche announces that it can no longer sustain a life built on avoidance. The soul is asking for more, not more success, not more pleasure, but more truth. Marie-Louise von Franz spoke of this as the mythic beginning, the point in every fairy tale where something is out of balance, a sick king, a kingdom in decay, a sudden exile. These are not random events. They are signals, invitations to the inner journey, a reminder that real healing does not begin with answers. It begins with the end of what no longer serves the self. So when everything feels like it's falling apart, when you can no longer control what once felt manageable, remember, this is not your failure. This is the soul calling you inward, not to punish you, but to invite you to the place where something truer can finally be born, because only when the known dissolves can the deeper order begin to rise. Be careful with this unconscious trap, trying to reorganize your life before understanding your pain. When life begins to fall apart, the ego rushes in. It wants to fix, to plan, to restore order. You may find yourself reorganizing routines, setting new goals, searching for quick solutions. But beneath the surface, the soul is not asking for action. It is asking for listening. And this is where many get lost, trying to build something new without understanding what the collapse was meant to reveal. This moment is not a task to solve. It is a language to be heard. A symbolic language that doesn't speak in straight lines or clear instructions. It speaks through ache, through confusion, through the very parts of you that no longer respond to old forms of motivation. You are not lazy. You are not lost. You are being emptied so that something real can be planted. Jung wrote, "We must be able to let go of the life we've planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." But letting go is not passive. It is a sacred surrender, a choice to feel the pain, not bypass it, to sit in the unknown, not rush into control, because the new life that wants to find you does not fit inside the structures that protected your survival. This is not the time to rebuild. This is the time to be still, to ask, what is my soul trying to say through this collapse? What belief? What role, what version of myself is no longer alive? The answers may not come in words. They may come in symbols, in images, in silence. And slowly, through this listening, a deeper kind of order begins to emerge, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Because when you listen to the pain before trying to escape it, you finally begin to hear the truth that lives underneath. The soul rarely speaks in words. It whispers in symbols. It repeats what has not yet been heard. And when you begin to move toward transformation, the unconscious does not remain silent. It begins to send signals, quiet at first, then louder, then unmistakable. You may start dreaming again, vividly, strangely, hauntingly, the same images, the same scenes, forests, fires, falls, death. You may encounter repeating numbers, phrases, songs that seem to follow you, encounters that feel more like messages than coincidence. And you wonder, is this real, or is something trying to reach me? Jung called this the language of the unconscious, a language not bound by time or logic, a language made of images, of resonance, of deep knowing. He spoke of synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that seem to align with your inner process. They are not accidents, they are mirrors. Marie-Louise von Franz noted that the beginning of transformation often comes with symbolic dreams. Death, for example, rarely means physical loss. It means the ending of a self-image. The forest is not just a forest. It is the descent, the unknown, the fertile darkness where new life begins. Fire is not just destruction, it is purification, alchemy, the soul burning off what can no longer remain. When you see these signs, don't rush to decode them with your mind. Feel them, let them work on you. Let them stir the places within you that words cannot reach. The unconscious doesn't want to be solved. It wants to be met. It wants to be seen. So when the symbols appear in dreams, in patterns, in strange and familiar echoes, pause. Something in you is speaking. Something in you is preparing to emerge. And when you begin to listen, you begin to remember a language your soul never forgot. Not all light heals. Sometimes light blinds, especially when it is used to avoid the darkness that must be felt. In moments of collapse, it's tempting to reach for comfort, for mantras, for affirmations, for spiritual theories that promise transcendence without dissent. But the soul doesn't rise by escaping pain. It rises by passing through it. This is the psychological trap that many fall into, mistaking denial for healing, repeating phrases like, "Everything happens for a reason," while the body trembles, while the heart breaks, while the unconscious burns with untended grief. It is not that these phrases are false, it is that they are incomplete, they are premature. Jung knew this well. He warned against the danger of bypassing suffering. He spoke of the alchemical furnace, the inner fire that purifies through pain. True transformation is not pleasant. It is not clean. It is not instant. It is an ordeal, a burning, a surrender. It asks for everything false to be stripped away, including the spiritual masks we wear to avoid feeling. Because real growth does not happen above the ground. It happens in the soil, in the dark, in the rot. That is where the gold is formed. That is where the self is born. And that is where your soul asks you to go, not to be punished, but to be made whole. To feel deeply is not a weakness. To grieve is not regression. To rage is not failure. These are the sacred expressions of a soul no longer willing to carry what it once had to suppress. And when you honor these feelings, without rushing to fix or transcend them, you allow the transformation to complete its course. There is no gold without the fire, and there is no awakening without the night. Before the light returns, the dark rises. This is the ancient rhythm of transformation. Long before clarity arrives, the forgotten parts of you begin to knock. At first, gently, then urgently. The emotions you buried, the stories you denied, the parts of yourself you called unworthy, they come back, not to punish you, but to be seen. Jung called this the emergence of the shadow, not a flaw, but a forgotten truth. The shadow holds everything the ego has rejected. Old grief, silent rage, deep fears, even your capacity for love, for power, for freedom. If they were not safe in childhood, they too were sent into hiding. And now they return. This is not regression. This is sacred retrieval. What hurts you now is what has been hurting in silence for years. These feelings are not new, they are ancient. But for the first time, they are rising into consciousness, not to destroy, but to integrate. You may feel overwhelmed. You may doubt yourself. You may wonder, why is this happening now? And the answer is, because your soul is ready. Ready to stop pretending. Ready to stop performing. Ready to meet yourself. Not just in light, but in truth. Jung said, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. To face it is not easy. It means dropping the mask. It means holding the discomfort without fleeing. It means standing in front of your own pain without judgment. But as you do, something begins to shift. The shame begins to soften. The fear begins to melt, and the part of you that once felt like the enemy starts to feel like home. Because transformation does not begin with perfection. It begins with permission to feel, to grieve, to remember, and finally to return to yourself. There is a moment in every myth, ancient or modern, when the hero disappears. Swallowed by a sea, lost in a forest, trapped in darkness. It is not death, but it feels like it. This is the belly of the whale, a place beyond identity, beyond answers, beyond control. It is where the old self dissolves, and the new self waits, unseen, unborn, unknown. Jonah, Pinocchio, Psyche, even Christ. They each entered the symbolic womb, a sacred pause between what was and what will be. And in that darkness, something profound begins, not a task, not a triumph, but a transformation of soul. Jung understood this moment not as regression, but as the initiation of individuation. When the ego no longer leads and the self begins to stir, it is not a place of logic, it is a place of silence, and in that silence the illusions fall away, the persona crumbles, the roles vanish, you no longer know who you are, and that is the threshold. Marie-Louise von Franz described this as the necessary dismemberment of the false identity, not as cruelty but as necessity. The psyche must undo the structure that was built for survival, not for truth, and in doing so, it prepares the ground for something more whole, more real, more alive. You may feel lost. You may feel nothing. But in this not knowing, you are being remade. You are not who you were, and you are not yet who you will become. You are in between, and that in between is sacred. The hero does not escape the whale. The hero is reborn through it. There is a truth that lives beneath every collapse, every silence, every tear. A truth too quiet to hear when life is loud, but unmistakable in the stillness that follows. Transformation doesn't begin when we feel ready. It begins when we are broken open, not because we failed, but because the old way of being can no longer carry the weight of our becoming. Carl Jung knew this well. He saw the self, the deeper essence of who we are, as the invisible hand behind every unraveling. The self does not seek comfort, it seeks wholeness, and wholeness requires rupture, it requires descent, it requires the chaos that makes room for the sacred order yet to come. What the ego sees as ruin, the soul recognizes as preparation. What looks like loss is often liberation in disguise. Your numbness, your fatigue, your confusion, they are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something ancient in you is awakening. Marie-Louise von Franz wrote that the moments before individuation are always dark, because what must die is not your life, but the illusions you were taught to live by, the role you played, the love you begged for, the truth you were too afraid to speak. All of it dissolves, not to destroy you, but to release you. So if you are in the in-between, not who you were, and not yet who you will be, trust this. You are not lost. You are being rewritten by something deeper than your mind can grasp, and though it hurts, though it feels like everything familiar is slipping away, this is what transformation feels like. The soul speaks through collapse. The self rises through surrender. And life begins again, exactly where the old one seemed to end.